I went out for a walk on one fine afternoon, looking for situations that I could help soon. And as I walked, I happened upon a fight. A man in broad daylight, brutalizing his wife. My time had come. To the rescue I ran, and stopped a concerned citizen from hurting that poor man. You don't know the situation. She could have hit him first. She might even be a thief. You don't know if that's her purse. Best just to walk away and your own business mind. It is a lie they tell that to intervene is kind. Don't call the police, they're on my side. Don't try to ascertain anything about this man, his wife, or who's to blame. If you'll give me just a few moments of your time, you'll soon come to see that the best perspective is mine. What you perceive as evil, let me redirect your gaze, and you will find that the blame is hers in so many, many ways. And if the blame isn't hers, well, look at what's worse. She didn't approach him correctly, and now she's in a hearse. No, the hearse is not the bad part. The part that's really evil is how she couldn't even break down the numbers. So simple. You think you see what's wrong, but let me redirect your gaze. I'm the devil's advocate. I destroy humanity with my ways. It is a poem that I wrote entitled The Devil's Advocate on April 19th, 2026. Hi, welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Naomi, and this is Mosaic in Progress. We're revisiting the idea of perspective this week, and specifically, I want to talk about how we have conversation with each other or how we don't have conversation with each other, and where our motives are coming from, or rather, I want you to examine where your own motives are coming from, because this is a thing that I have noticed that seems to unfortunately be universal, and it is the idea of always needing to be right. And on the surface, that sounds like a really good thing to strive for, but I have observed that it always comes at a very high cost. So let's get into it. One of the things that really prompted this idea for this episode was an observation of defensiveness, both in myself and in several people that I know and in people in conversations online, of this defensiveness of not wanting to be associated. And I sort of briefly touched on this a couple of episodes back when I was talking about racism and conversations around that, is there's this wanting to distance yourself from a demographic that you might actually be a part of. Like, oh, I'm not one of those Christians. I'm not one of those white people. And on the surface, that can seem like a good thing to be like, oh no, I'm not one of them. But it also becomes really problematic because rather than addressing the problems of the group that you are a part of, you just kind of dissociate yourself from them. And that is not to say that it is your responsibility to fix an entire group, but it is your responsibility if you are part of a problematic culture, whatever that culture is, it is your responsibility to call it out. You don't get to just step back and go, oh, I'm not one of them. I'm not like that. Not for me, while still enjoying the privileges that come with being a part of that demographic. You can, in some cases, fully pull out from a culture or demographic. As an example, leaving the church or completely cutting off your family. and now you're no longer getting the inheritance. You're no longer, invited to the family dinners, etc., etc. You're no longer enjoying the privilege of being a part of that family. Or, for example, leaving the church. When I left the church, pretty much everybody who claimed that they were my friends from that church cut me off, which says a lot about what friendship actually means to them. But regardless, I no longer enjoy the privileges of being a part of the church because I left it. Not everything you can do that with. I mean, you can't stop having non-melanated skin. You can't suddenly, change the color of your skin or stop being a man, for example. And so when you are associated with a specific demographic, saying these like kind of dissociating things like, oh, I'm not one of them, really is a way of avoiding your own responsibility and accountability. And then there's kind of the flip side of that, of these litmus tests of, who's a real Christian. And you see it a lot with gender, especially. You're not a real woman or you're not a real man if you don't, fill in the blank of whatever criteria they've decided makes you a real one. It comes down to this, like, are you, quote, one of them question? Whether it's, do you actually fit in or do you not? And the thing about the othering of like for not real Christians, for example, is that you might be ostracized by a specific group, but if you're still claiming the label of Christian, there are certain ones who are still going to be accepting you. You're just not accepted in all of the circles. It becomes like this purity test all the time of like, are you good enough to be a part of this demographic? And you see it especially in religion, but you see it so much in politics. And I see it so much more in left-wing politics than I ever did in right-wing politics, which is very ironic. The right mostly does it within their religions and their churches. And I see the exact same attitudes on the left. Left-wing politics and those who are involved in it, not just those who are in office, but those who are really politically involved, makes me want to be not involved in politics even more than anyone on the right ever did. It's like going back to church of this, well, you're not doing this, so you're not really serious, or we can't accept you because you're not doing this specific thing. And these like constant just berating of those who you want to be on your side. And it's mind-blowing to me that, okay, you're trying to recruit these people to do more, and you think that lecturing them and telling them they're awful for not doing this is gonna work for you. Like, shame has never worked as a recruitment tactic. Shame works as a sort of societal pressure, or motivator, only in instances where you already have control. And by that I do mean an abusive system. And there's this old saying that hypocrisy is the price that vice pays to virtue. And that's really the crux behind societal pressure. It's not that people aren't thinking or acting a certain way, they're just hiding it because you've made them feel like they can't fully express who they are and fully be themselves. And whenever I see shame being used as a recruitment tactic, whether it's from the church or from liberals and leftists trying to get people involved in politics, I always think, what are you doing? What is your motivation here? Because it seems from everything that they say, and I mean this on both sides of that the motivation is to be right. Not a cooperative society, not finding common ground, not understanding the other side, not cooperating with people who are maybe very much aligned with you but slightly different from you. It's just being right. And I know there are a bunch of people who are about to be like, of course, I don't want to understand their perspective. I don't care about understanding Nazis or fascists or whatever. And that's fair. But also, what's your goal? Because the thing about killing conversation, whatever the conversation is that you are left with one choice. And there's so many people who are like, no, we'll just vote them out. That's not how fascism works. Fascism doesn't take over and then release control because an election happened. And that's any authoritarian government. And if you think that you're going to be able to vote out an authoritarian government, you've either not studied history, you didn't pay attention when you did it, or you're just delusional. And I mean that with so much love. But seriously, if you think you can vote out an authoritarian government, that doesn't happen ever. So when we kill these conversations, especially the difficult conversations that nobody wants to have with somebody who thinks differently than them, questions, these conversations about sexism or racism or, even abortion. And I think abortion is a really good example of one because I have been on both sides of this issue and I was firmly pro-life. That is not one that I can say that I was like brainwashed into. I was misinformed, but I believed in that fully with my whole heart. I was way too young to learn what abortion was when I did, and it was something that affected me emotionally for a really long time. And I was very, very pro-life. And the thing that kills this conversation is that people who are pro-choice refuse to see the people, regular people. I'm not talking about politicians or people with money and power who are pulling strings and controlling things. They don't count. I do not consider them a part of the conversation. You're never going to convince somebody who is utilizing an issue to maintain power and control or make money. You're never going to convince them of your side of the issue. And I'm leaving that out. I'm talking about your neighbor who is pro-life and you're pro-choice. This is what I'm talking about. The conversations with regular people. I have never seen anyone who is pro-choice acknowledge the fact that people who are pro-life actually believe that the fetus, the embryo, whatever, is a human life. It is a person. And I so rarely see the conversations happening around that. It used to be a lot more of the conversations because we had these like personhood bills and conversations around personhood. That is the crux of the matter. Because if you fully believe that the unborn fetus, the embryo, whatever, is a person, then yes, it is murder. And so much of the argument from the pro-choice side is on attacking the pro-life side for just wanting to control women's bodies. No, that's what the government wants to do. And you can't have a conversation with someone who truly believes that that's a person about something that they don't fully hold within their belief system. And the thing that I see from the pro-life side is that they don't acknowledge that the pro-choice side is looking at the autonomy of the mother and do not believe that that is a person. And the conversation doesn't happen around whether or not the fetus or embryo should be considered a person and at what point someone has personhood. And again, that used to be where the conversation was. And we drifted very far away from it, because if you have those conversations, people will come to an understanding with each other. And they may still disagree, but they will come to an understanding of each other. And if you can make it about, oh, you just want to kill babies and you just hate women, then people stay divided, and the people in power can continue gaining more control, and the people who are making money off of it can continue making money off of it. And so you kill this conversation by not focusing on what the actual issue is. And people can keep hating each other and not having conversations. But this is one of the things that I keep seeing all of these people on the left saying, I'm not going to have a conversation with these MAGA people. I'm not going to have a conversation with them. I'm not even going to talk to them. They're not worth talking to. When you decide that a person is not worth talking to, you have dehumanized that person. Period. Full stop. Because at that point, especially when they are supporting whoever is already in power, what you are saying is, you're just going to have to die. And a lot of people are going to say, oh, that's very extreme. No, it is. Because that's what you're doing. If you're not going to have a conversation, if you're not going to cooperate, if you're not going to have a community, a society, then what you're doing is you're saying might makes right. We're not going to have a conversation like people. The only other option is force. So you're either going to subjugate them and force them into doing whatever you want to, or you're going to have a conversation with them. Those are the only options for changing society. And if you choose the option of subjugation, then it's just a matter of time before it gets turned around on you. Because subjugation only lasts as long as you can maintain public support. And in a divided society, it's just going to flip-flop. So if you won't have conversations, what are your plans for taking over violently? And I don't think anyone actually has those plans, nor do I think they should, let me be very clear. But if you're not going to have conversations with people who are different from you, civil conversations with people who are different from you, what are you doing? Because I see so many people who are like, oh, we'll just vote them out. You've got to vote. You've got to go to protests. And they think that working within the system is going to change things, but they also won't have conversations. It's a delusional mindset that is just completely devoid of understanding reality. And I think so much of why this happens is because so many of the conversations that we have are just online. We won't sit with someone who is very different from us and have an actual conversation. We intentionally avoid the people who are different from us. And I think we see this a lot with like this, I'm not going to family Christmas dinner or Thanksgiving dinner or whatever because I don't want to deal with my racist family members, which is fair. And depending on your racist family members, maybe you have had conversations with them and they're not going to change their mind. But maybe they're not. Maybe you're just giving up before you've given them a chance. Because the people who know us, and we all associate with people in some way or another who are very different from us at work, family members, whatever. We all have people in our circle who are extremely different from us in their mindset. If you're not going to sit and have a conversation with them, who is going to? And it's funny because there was this idea when I was in the church, and it's very strong in the evangelical church, of like, you've got to tell people the truth. You've got to tell people the gospel. And to a degree, I do think that that is a good way to live, just not in the way that it was presented and how it was carried out. If you're not going to have a conversation with somebody, you who know this person, you who, we're going to use, your racist uncle as an example, you who probably love them more than anybody else is going to, who thinks differently from them, who doesn't have that prejudice. If you're not going to have a conversation with them, who is? And I see so many of these conversations approached, and especially because so many of them are online instead of in person, they're approached like you're running into them with a battering ram. It's so combative. And that's not to say that being racist or sexist or anything else, any other kind of prejudice is okay or should just be like, oh, it's fine. But do you change your mind if somebody attacks you and tells you you're a terrible person when you didn't think that you were doing anything wrong, very few people do. And I'm not saying this to say that, oh, you should just overlook it or handle them with kid gloves, but there's a way to approach things to get people to listen to you. And there's a way to approach things to tell someone you're setting a boundary and you don't want to have anything to do with them. And I just think that we so often have these standards of perfection for so many people. You know, the perfection of you have to do this, this, and this to be a good liberal or to be a good Christian or whatever. Or if we're talking to somebody about their prejudices and you have to respond in this way exactly, or you don't really care. And we don't give people the opportunity to stumble as they're getting up. I see this over and over again. And this is not to say to waste your breath on people who don't care, but so often we set these unrealistic standards of how someone who has just racism as an example spent their entire life being racist without realizing it oftentimes, how they should conduct themselves immediately as they start dismantling that belief system and understanding where their problematic viewpoints are coming from and how they're showing up in the world with them, that we don't allow them the grace to stumble as they're getting up. And I'm saying this as a white woman and speaking on this issue of racism specifically, speaking more to white people. We don't really have the grounds to be that judgmental of other white people who are dismantling their racism. It's our responsibility to sit with the discomfort with them as they're dismantling it. We don't get to have the purity standards because we ourselves have been problematic and probably still are in a lot of ways that we don't even realize. I just think that the conversations get killed too early and too often without allowing for people to just be human. And I say this as someone who left the faith that they were raised with, that they had believed their entire life. It takes quite a bit of undoing to change as an adult something that is ingrained in you, especially when you didn't realize that it was problematic while it was being ingrained in you. We have to start giving people more grace. We have to start opening up these conversations. And I think so much is that we don't have community anymore. We live in a society, but we have no community. And I think that makes a huge difference. I saw a clip recently. This young man goes around and he stops older people on the street and he'll just like ask them, if you were like 21 right now, what would you do? Or if you were young again, what would you do? And this woman said, I would go to the pub. And he was like, oh, she said it was the best thing, that we would all just, you get off work, you go down to the pub, you might have a pint or two, but the main thing was just the community, that we were all there together and we socialized and we talked with each other and you met new people or you saw old friends, and it was just where everybody went together. And you don't really see that happening anymore. You don't have those community gathering spaces. And I mean, sure, we have bars and restaurants and stuff, but you don't see the community gathering like it used to happen. And so much of our interactions are online or through phones, and we have forgotten how to treat people like people. It used to be that people got along with each other a lot better because that was your community. You might think different, but you figured out a way to find common ground. And I think in a way, internet and social media and everything has really been a positive in that it has opened up the world to new perspectives and finding people with common ground and everything. But in another way, it has harmed us because we have, number one, dehumanized everyone. You very rarely see people treating people like people. And number two, we've forgotten how to have community. We've just forgotten how to. And so many people are so introverted and intentionally socially isolating. And I know I've certainly been guilty of that myself, to the point that people just don't want to go out and be around people, which is very abnormal for human behavior. Normal human behavior is to be around other people. I'm not saying not having your alone time or your quiet time, but it is normal to want to be around other humans. There's a reason that, like, we had this word hermit, and it was like this weird person who didn't want to be around everyone. That's abnormal, and it used to be rare. And the internet and the way that we have now structured our society because of the internet has enabled it to be a normal thing. People order groceries, never go out and see people. They can order food in, have it dropped off on their doorstep, never interact with a person at all. And it's become a normal thing for that to happen, and it's become almost a goal for that to happen, to not have to interact with people. And because of that, the tolerance for other people has dropped significantly. If you're not in my perfect cookie cutter mold of what I want to be around, I'm not going to tolerate you. I'm not going to try to understand you. I'm not going to help you try to understand me. I'm just going to cut you off. And it's almost like a wasteful mindset. I remember when I was a little kid, there was a neighbor girl her parents were very wealthy, and she would just like scribble, like a quick scribble with a pen or pencil on a notebook page, and then rip the page out, wad it up, and tear it up just because she could. And I think about her whenever I think about like this wasteful mindset of like, oh, I have enough. I don't need this. So I'm just going to throw it away. Like the people who just throw away leftovers. And if you're a person who throws away leftovers, no judgment, but I am judging you a little. Just kidding, kind of. Just this idea of I've got enough, I'm not going to deal with this. And we kind of have this idea towards people now of just like, I've got my friends, I'm not going to deal with you. And I truly believe that the internet and social media has really bolstered that mentality of treating people as disposable. And treating people as disposable will always lead to societal breakdown. Always. And so try to shift your perspective a little bit. That doesn't mean that you should agree with racist or sexist ideology or problematic policies like restricting access to abortion or birth control or anything like that. But it does mean that if we're going to fix things, we have to be able to have a conversation with the people who we're around. Because the people who are supporting these policies, for example, are doing it because they believe it's right. And they're going to keep supporting it as long as they believe it's right. And if you won't have a conversation with them to shift their perspective, who's going to? And so the support will continue to be there. We have to sometimes check our own egos and see where we're operating from and shift into a mentality of love. So love can be tough sometimes. Love can be very difficult conversations. And sometimes love is for the environment or for the world around us or for the people who are being harmed. Because the best way to help the people who are being harmed is to disarm the people who are harming them. And sometimes disarming the people who are harming them means having a really difficult conversation. Difficult for us to have that conversation. If we're not willing to be uncomfortable in a conversation to help make the world a better place, what are we even doing? We're like, I'll go stand out in 90-degree heat on a street corner and yell at cars passing or hold a sign, but I'm not going to talk to my coworker who's super racist because I don't like being around him. We want too much of a hero storyline without actually looking at what we could do to make the world a better place. I hope this episode on perspective has given you a new perspective. And I hope you'll join me next week on the podcast as we both continue to work on our mosaic in progress. Please join me on Patreon. You don't have to pay to join. You can join for free or you can subscribe. There's 4 different tiers, I believe. And all of my links can be found at linktree.com/mosaic in progress. And I'll see you all next week.